I guess.
Ethan's cursing over here. I don't know what he's doing.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to put a sticky note. I hate the light on my microphone. It irritates the shit out of me. I hate it.
All right, everybody, what's going on? We are live. Ethan is messing with his microphone.
Don't mind me.
Very professional. I am as listed on here. I am Stompy at FF Stompy. I'm here with James Catoulis at James the Brain and Ethan Turner, our resident doctor at eTurnerFF_PT, who looks ridiculous.
Yes.
We are here. We've decided to change things up a bit as we start to enter the playoffs and the off season. So we kind of want to cater to both those who aren't in the playoffs and looking forward to the off season, and those who are in the playoffs. So what we have decided to do is do a standard. Our standard show on Tuesdays, and then Thursdays, Wednesday, Thursday, we will do a live show to talk about all of the start sits, talk about the injuries, to help you guys set your lineups. So obviously we can't talk about the Cowboys and Bears game, though Mitchell Trubisky has thrown an interception, and that's hurting me in the Scott Fish Bowl. So that's not good. But we can talk about the rest of these games, and I think what we're going to do for this format is we'll just go through each of the games, talk about some of the players that we like, dislike in these matchups, talk about some of the injuries with our, again, resident doctor, and hopefully he can give you some insight. Yeah, that would be James the Brain.
Mm-hmm. That's James.
But I will stop talking because I've been talking too much. How is it going, guys?
Going fantastic. I see Ethan. You finally got that light taken care of on his microphone.
So. Yeah, that's always irritated me.
I think he's doing well.
My whole life, it's irritated me, and all I had to do was turn it, and that's pretty much how my life is. We make a big deal out of a very small issue.
All right.
I'm doing well. I'm incredibly busy. My personal life has gotten much busier. I think most people know by now that I run my own PT clinic, and we're getting ready to open a second PT clinic. So in the course of 6 months, I'm now in charge of 2 clinics. So we have been, and they're about 50 miles apart from each other. So I have been at both today and our third clinic that I'm not in charge of. So it's been a busy day today. Wow. So I'm kind of running all over the place, but
killing it.
I think we should have Ethan take care of injuries from now on. What do you think, Stomp?
Yeah, I think he probably might have more schooling in that, James.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of guesswork from us, like the Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette, which we've been very wrong on this season. I don't think we're very good at this, so we'll let Ethan take that on.
Yeah, Street Smarts doesn't cross over in this.
Though Ethan kind of came into our group chat earlier this week after Dalvin Cook got the shoulder injury and kind of backhanded both John and James, who were going at each other about injuries, and it was really funny to me. So I just wanted to share that.
I get fired up about stuff, and sometimes you just gotta, set everybody straight, and that's what happened. For those of you that obviously weren't in the conversation with that, we're debating, or they were debating whether or not Dalvin Cook should be considered injury prone. And James is very much in the yes. So James, why don't you explain why you believe Dalvin Cook is injury prone?
Well,
despite the fact that he has lots of injuries.
The injury
if your defense is he gets injured a lot, you can just quit.
Okay.
Wow.
The injury prone label is thrown around a lot, right? But yeah. I believe you're prone.
Horrible turn.
You're prone to have more injuries when it's, and you can speak more on this, Ethan, but when it's a soft tissue thing, when it's something that has been a problem, has been an injury that has happened more than once. And I think it's you're prone to re-injure it, right? So that to me is what injury prone means. When I see somebody who suffers a third shoulder injury in 6 seasons, that means that he's probably prone to more, right? I mean, I would think, unless it's like a huge fluke that he's had 3 shoulder injuries in the past 6 years, I would say that he is prone to injuring that shoulder, right? To me, it's just pretty basic, but I don't know. Apparently,
here's the thing: is you said some good stuff in there that I do like, that I do agree with, especially on the what makes a player injury prone or not injury prone. The problem I have with the term, naturally, when I see it in the fantasy community, it's part of the reason I got into talking about injuries for fantasy, was because I was so over hearing he gets hurt, so he must be injury prone. And that is just not the case. We've seen multiple players that get hurt often, miss a lot of games. Keenan Allen comes to mind. There for a long time, Keenan Allen was one of the poster boys for, he is injury prone. And the injuries he had didn't predispose him to future injuries. And I think that's where we're on the same page with Dalvin Cook. The shoulder injuries do raise a serious red flag for his future longevity, as do the multiple knee and hamstring injuries that he's had. All of these things can lead to further injury down the road. It increases his future injury risk. So that to me is what makes a player injury prone. And I think that you're on that pace. But I had to lay the smack down when you just say a player's injury prone, you have to be a little bit more descriptive than that. To me, it's a lazy term. A lot of times you'll hear it. People that don't know anything about injuries or injury risk or how a current injury plays into a future injury, they say, oh, well, he misses a bunch of games, he must be injury prone. And that's people that don't understand how these injuries work. Basically just labeling a guy that they don't really understand it. So I appreciate that you do have sound logic, and I agree with you. I just get a little fired up when I hear, oh, well, this guy's injury prone because he gets hurt. That's not really how it works.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Ethan Turner is on the podcast, and he is so popular in the community. His football takes are middling at best, but he's
easy there. Easy. I'm not just a doctor.
You're a doctor.
Hey, I have a winning record in fantasy. I made 7-9 playoffs. One of my teams is actively tanking, but has still scored the 5th most points in the league, despite it actively tanking just from trades I've made. So I don't want to hear about it. Okay. I don't want to hear about it. All right. I can play this fantasy game too. Scott Fish. I'm not a Scott Fishbowl champion. I finished 6-6 this year. Didn't make the playoffs. It was very devastating to me. And I still have to hold out hope that one day I can also brag about that. So I'm not a Scott Fishbowl champion, unlike some people that may be in the show right now.
And I'm still in it. So
I mean, we could be in the presence of the only back-to-back champion possibly in the future. I don't know if Stompy's head could fit.
I don't think
on
anybody
the screen anymore.
I don't think anybody could take I don't think anybody could take my ego if that happened.
He might be the number 1 most blocked fantasy analyst if he wins it again, because it's just geez, here we go again. We'll never hear the end of that.
Yeah, I mean that transitions pretty well into how are you guys doing in terms of playoffs. Ethan's already said he's 7-9. I have way too many leagues.
I think 9 is too many. I'm cutting down next year.
I have well into the 20s.
Oh, geez. Okay. I wouldn't have made any playoffs.
And a lot of them are rebuilds, so I didn't really want to put that out there for all the fans to see. Oh yeah, no, I made playoffs in 60% because I have some like Ethan said, some active tanking or some rebuilds going on that I took over this year. So I'm doing well in the ones that I care about most. In my 2 big money leagues, I'm in the playoffs. In my home dynasty league, I'm in the playoffs. In my redraft home league, I'm in the playoffs. Scott Fishbowl, I'm still alive. So in the ones that I care about, I'm doing fine. James, how are things going on your end?
I don't want to talk about it.
James is like, I'm going to lose followers.
It's been a rough year. I'm going to tell you that much. Even the leagues that I thought I had dominant teams in, I had one league with Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Odell Beckham Jr., Stephon Diggs, Mark Andrews. I thought I was stacked. I am the 6th seed in the playoffs. So it's been rough. It's been a tough year for me. So I agreed with Addison. I'm also stomping well into the 20s in leagues. I was just too lazy to go back and count how many I was in the playoffs and how many I wasn't. So I just, but I can tell you, I missed the playoffs and more than I made the playoffs this year.
That's how fantasy goes sometimes, man. I don't know. I know for me, and especially in some of the season-long leagues I've joined, I tried something trying to stack Chiefs. Obviously, that didn't really work out for me because of Damian and because of Patrick Mahomes' injuries. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes stuff just doesn't work out in fantasy. So,
yeah, I took a lot of Juju Smith-Schuster early in drafts this year, expecting just astronomical amounts of volume, and Ben getting hurt right at the beginning of the year, and that offense just not really looking the same without him. That hurt me in a few spots. Still managed to make the playoffs, like I said, in 7 out of 9. There's a few teams that have done pretty darn well. I joined an IDP league for the first time this year, and I got a first round bye in that league. I actually won my division. I think I'm 10-3 or 9-4, which is I felt like was good. I'm trying to broaden my fantasy experience outside, so I tried a lot of leagues that I've never tried before. I'm in a tiered PPR league with a bunch of other analysts. I think that's the other thing that ultimately these stats don't. When you talk about, oh, well, I'm in 20 leagues and I made the playoffs, and you hear, well, I made the playoffs in, 90% of my leagues and I'm in 25 leagues. And I think, okay, but are you playing with people that actually play fantasy football as intensely as you do? Like, I feel like you have to, if you're not going up against normal competition, like the leagues that I'm in where I'm playing against nobodies. I mean, I shouldn't say nobodies, but I'm playing against my friends, the people that aren't as interested as I am. I tend to do very, very well in those leagues. It's the ones where I'm playing against other people that know what they're doing and are on top of it as much as I am. Those are the leagues where I feel like I tend to go, 8-6 or 9-5. And those are the leagues that I'm more proud of to go, to have a winning record in those leagues,
right?
Because I'm going against people that are pretty darn good at what they do. So,
right.
Scott Fishbowl, same thing. I started 6-2, but then injuries just absolutely derailed my season. So I couldn't get 2 more wins, which is what you need to get into the playoffs there. But again, you're playing with really good people. So if you miss out, I drafted Brandon Cooks and OJ Howard in the 4th and 5th rounds, like that right there. The fact that I was even 500 tells you that I made some good decisions throughout the year to even get to that, because that would sink a lot of people. So,
right.
I think that those numbers are cool to say. I think I was at like 60% win percentage this year in leagues, but really it doesn't matter. It's more about, can you win championships? Can you make good weekly decisions? And I don't think that your record in fantasy necessarily dictates how good you are at actually being an analyst and talking about it.
That's the truth. And we can only control so much. I always make this comment that fantasy football is about 25% skill, 75% luck. So, I mean, you can't really do anything about injuries. You can't do anything about how the coach views a player and how you view a player. So, yeah, I think the at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun. It's a game within a game. Have fun. But that's enough about us. We've been talking about 15 minutes about us, and that's enough of that. So let's move into our Week 14 games here. First, we have a question in the chat from Richard Lopez. He actually has a couple questions. So he needs to start to, obviously, Superflex Super Show, duh. If you're not playing Superflex, you're doing it wrong. Ryan Wentz and Brissett, he needs to start to. James, why don't you go ahead and start first?
Yeah, I think, I look to the matchups here. Matt Ryan's got a nice one against Carolina. That defense hasn't been great, especially against the pass and against opposing quarterbacks. And same thing with Wentz. I mean, Wentz is going against the Giants. That's a game that honestly, the Eagles are going to need to win no matter what Dallas does. If they want to be in this conversation after getting embarrassed against Miami, they got to win this game. And Carson Wentz has been putting up numbers even when they've been losing. So I think Ryan and Wentz is where I would lean here. Brissett hasn't looked the same to me since he came back from his injury. So I'm going to fade him here, and I think I would go Ryan and Wentz. Would you guys do the same? Or
I think so too. I know for sure Ryan, because like you said, it's a decent matchup with Carolina there. Wentz has kind of been underperforming this season, I suppose. But the Giants have a horrendous secondary. So, I mean, that's definitely going to be a good matchup for Wentz this week. So, yeah, I definitely agree there. Go with the bird teams.
Man, this one's tough. I actually like Brissett against Tampa Bay quite a bit. So, that one's a little tough for me. I would say definitely Ryan. I think that even when that team's losing, he tends to put up numbers just because they don't seem to have a running game this year, which I don't think anyone really expected. Their running game has been pretty atrocious. So, I expect Ryan. I expect Julio Jones to return this week. This is a team that really kind of wants to at least compete towards the end of the year. They haven't looked good at all. We thought coming into the year that Matt Ryan was going to just like light the world on fire. I think he played like 95% of his games in domes to start this year. So the fact that he's not been, that team isn't really performing as well is really a testament. I do think that this Indy game with Tampa Bay could become a shootout, which gives me a little bit, it leans me Brissett a little bit over Wentz. Again, Brissett doesn't have the same type of, neither of these guys really, I don't think, have a good offense around them. I don't really particularly like any of the wide receiver course for either one. I don't think T.Y. Hilton is going to come back this week. At least it doesn't look that way as of right now. So I would lean Brissett a little bit, but I think definitely Ryan. And then if everybody else is going Wentz, I don't think you can go wrong with that as well.
So I agree in terms of the matchup with Brissett. However, Brissett has been extremely underwhelming of late. He has yet to, or over the past, I guess, 4 full games he played, he got injured in that Pittsburgh game.
Mm-hmm.
He has not produced a 20 fantasy point day. He's thrown under 150 yards in 2 of those games. And like, while it's a great matchup, I just can't trust him. And I would rather, because Matt Ryan they're throwing the ball a ton, like you mentioned, and I can't trust Brissett over Ryan.
I wouldn't put Brissett over. I think you definitely have to.
Sorry, I meant over
talking about Wentz.
I meant over Wentz because of that matchup. Because that matchup, while not as good, is still an extremely good matchup against New York.
Yeah, I think if the safe play is definitely Ryan and Wentz, based on the last 4 weeks for sure.
Right.
I think it'll be interesting to monitor too. And Ethan, maybe you can talk to this a little bit more. Is Marlon Mack? Is he going to play? Because if he does, that could mean less pass attempts for Brissett against that defense against Tampa Bay. And I'm not sure, because I know Jonathan Williams and Naheem Hines have stepped in and done well, but it seems like the running game has kind of stepped forward in that for the Colts as of late, and Brissett's numbers have suffered because of it. So I kind of wonder what we can expect from from Marlon Mack if he's going to play or not.
I do expect him to play. He's been dealing with a hand issue. He has practiced in full the last 2 days, so I would expect Marlon Mack to play and to return this week. I think he's also going to get back Paris Campbell. While still a rookie, I don't think you can expect a ton from him. He has shown to at least be effective in space when he's on the field. Not T.Y. Hilton. I don't expect T.Y. Hilton to be back this week. So he's still going to be without his best weapon, Brissett is, but getting Marlon Mack back, getting Paris Campbell, Pascal has looked good. Jack Doyle, with Eric Ebron on IR, we've seen Doyle get a little bit of work here in the last couple of weeks. It's not a horrible. The Tampa Bay's defense is not as good as it's good matchup for both. So I don't think you can go wrong with any of the three. I would go Ryan and then basically whichever one you like over Wentz versus Brissett there. I do like what you said about the Giants. Like the Giants, again, the good news is you got three guys that have pretty good matchups this week. So I don't really feel like I don't think quarterback is going to be the position that costs you the week if you end up laying a dud.
All right, and Richard also had one more question for us. OBJ, Woods, Alshon, and Kirk, and he can only play one. Christian Kirk, that is. We'll start with Ethan this time.
I have a hard time not starting OBJ. The only guy that makes me – I think Woods is the safest play of the four for me. I just think that – I think we're going to see a lot of Woods. He was the best. He looks like the most consistent wide receiver on that team. Brandon Cooks has disappeared. Cooper Kupp, despite starting the year super hot, has gone complete reverse of what I expected Cooper Kupp season to go. I thought coming off the ACL, he would start slow and then finish hot. And he started hot and now is finishing slow. I almost wonder if something's not bothering him either in that knee or he's got some other type of injury that we just don't know about. So I think Alshon is more touchdown dependent. Kirk could be kind of a wild card if you really need a huge game. Kirk has shown that he can do that every now and again. But I would say that it would either be Woods or OBJ. OBJ is going to be it's tough not to start your stud, but I know that John Hogue is probably like, oh geez, I hate that term, but I don't know. I think I would probably go Woods just a little bit over OBJ and then Kirk and then Alshon.
What do you think, James?
I'm going to be totally opposite of Ethan here for the most part.
Okay, James and I are no longer friends.
I know OBJ does have a pretty decent matchup against Cincinnati. It'll be interesting to see how Cleveland does, but I mean he hasn't been the same. He just hasn't been the guy that you drafted him to be. So it's at this point of the year, I think I would probably lean Alshon. I mean, he had a really nice game coming back last week. He really did. And if I'm going to say that Carson Wentz is going to put up numbers against a weak Giants secondary, he's probably going to do it with Alshon Jeffrey being his number one. Last week, with Alshon coming back, I mean, he really looked like he was healthy. He looked the part. He put up good numbers. And I would expect him to be able to do the same against the Giants. Look, Wentz doesn't have a whole lot of weapons. It's Miles Sanders, a couple tight ends, and nothing on the outside of Alshon, unless you want to count Nelson Aguilar dropping balls. They just don't really have a lot of depth out there. So I think Alshon's going to have to be a big part of that game plan against the Giants, who can't stop anybody. Not only would I expect a touchdown, but I would also expect a lot of yards too. So I think I would lean Alshon here, to be honest.
I agree with James. That matchup, that secondary matchup is pretty good for Philadelphia, for Alshon. In each of the last 4 games for the Giants, 5 games, they have allowed at least or double-digit fantasy points to at least 2 wide receivers. In week 8, they allowed 3 wide receivers to get double-digit fantasy points. So, and we're not just talking about like slot receivers here either. Devontae Adams had 2 touchdowns last week. Allen Robinson had 25.1 fantasy points, over 100 yards and a touchdown. Amari Cooper, 80 yards and a touchdown. Kenny Golladay, 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. We're talking about those big outside receivers as well. So I like Alshon this week over all of those guys, but I agree. If not Alshon, it's Woods for me. I don't trust Baker and Cleveland. I mean, they play Cincinnati, but Cincinnati has actually not given up fantasy points to wide receivers this season. They are near the bottom of the league in terms of fantasy points given up to wide receivers. So they more give up fantasy points to guys like tight ends. So and running backs. So I mean, Demetrius Harris might be an option, but definitely Hunt and Chubb this week for Cleveland. And I would not expect huge games from Jarvis Landry or OBJ this week.
I mean, what's your opinion? I guess we're basing Alshon. I mean, just looking through his stats this year. I mean, before he played Miami, who's the worst team, one of the worst teams in the league. You know, he had 16 targets, 9 receptions, 137 yards, and a touchdown. That was in week 13. Before that, he hadn't eclipsed 76 yards, looks like his high for the season, and that was on 12 targets and 10 receptions. So he's not being used down the field the way that he in previous years has been. I feel like that's a risky play. I mean, I know the matchup is prime. I just feel like, man, you know, that was even without Zach Ertz. And so if Ertz comes back, you know, I just feel like that's kind of a risky play for me at this stage in the fantasy year, my personal opinion.
And that's fair. I mean, just looking at the schedule and the games he has played, Philly's had a rough schedule this season in terms of secondaries. I mean, Washington, before they kind of fell apart, well, I guess they were fine, but he had a touchdown. And then he played Green Bay, who at the start of the season were shutting down everybody. And then the last 4 games, or the last 3 games before Miami, Dallas, Buffalo, Chicago. So it's not like he's had good matchups. I mean, he produced all right against Buffalo. I mean, he caught 4 for 36 against Chicago. Against Dallas, he only caught 2 for 38. But those are teams that shut down wide receivers. And I don't think Alshon is a guy that he's very much not matchup proof. But when he has faced a bad secondary, like I said, Washington, Minnesota, Miami, he has put up numbers. Even New York, he caught 6 for 52, so he still had a double-digit fantasy game there. So when he has a decent matchup, he gets targeted and he puts up fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the argument for all of these guys. My personal opinion is you go with the safest guy, which is Woods. And he didn't specify if this was PPR or not. I think that would change things as well. In a standard league, you know, I think that I would probably put Alshon a little bit higher, at least over OBJ, because I feel like Alshon has a better chance at a touchdown than OBJ does on a week-to-week basis, just because he gets used in the red zone.
All right. Hopefully Richard got the answers he needed from us there. So let's talk about some of these games this week. We already talked about Matt Ryan a little bit in his matchup, but first game we'll talk about here is the Carolina Panthers and Atlanta Falcons. 2 relatively poor defenses here. The over-under is 48.5. Is there really anybody that you are afraid of playing in this matchup?
I tell you a guy who I like, but I'm always concerned with, at least this year, just because it's been kind of a roller coaster type season, and that's Devonta Freeman. And I know that Stompy, you were big on Devonta Freeman coming into the year, and this is a matchup that he can exploit. He could have a huge game here, but the problem is that it's really hard to trust Atlanta to continue running the ball. It's hard to trust that offensive line. And it's hard to trust that he's going to put up the numbers that you would want him to in this kind of matchup. So tell me kind of how do you feel, Stompy, and how do you feel, Ethan, about Devonta Freeman in this one?
So I guess I'll start in that I love it. Devonta Freeman started off the first couple of games slow. He has not been, I mean, the Panthers and the Falcons in general have not been able to run the ball. I know I was pretty excited about the offensive line draft picks they made, but that absolutely has not helped him. But he's been heavily involved in the passing game when he's healthy. And And that's kind of one of the big reasons I really liked him going into the season was regardless of how you felt about him as a runner, he is involved in the passing game. And so with that being said, yeah, I mean, the Panthers have given up the third most fantasy points over the past 5 weeks. They give up a ton of points on the or a ton of yards on the ground, but they're also giving up receptions. They've allowed 21 receptions over the past 5 weeks as well. And I expect Devontae Freeman to be leaned on kind of heavily here. I mean, yeah, Hooper's back. Julio should be back. And I'll let Ethan talk about all of the injuries on Atlanta here in a second, but I like this matchup a lot because regardless, again, of how you feel about Freeman as a runner, he's still going to be heavily involved in that pass game.
Yeah, I mean, just to update, I do expect Julio Jones and Hooper to return this week. Both are getting practices in. Both tend to be trending towards playing. So obviously those are guys you kind of have to start. I'd be a little bit more concerned with Julio just because his shoulder injury, again, didn't kind of came out of nowhere. I think they gave him a week off, which I feel like he needed just to try to keep him healthy. You know, he has a long history of foot injuries, so a shoulder is something different. You know, that game being on a Thursday, I think really impacted their decision to play Julio or sit Julio, that is. As far as Hooper goes, you know, he's coming off an MCL. We'll see how effective he is. I think that this is a team that can be exploited with the tight end and with the wide receiver and with the running back. I mean, this is a pretty prime matchup, so I'm not really afraid to start any of those dudes. Devontae Freeman, he's so hit or miss. I mean, the fact that he's still involved with the pass game tells me that, you know, I'm not afraid to play him, especially in PPR formats. But man, it just seems like as soon as you need a big game out of him, that running game just hasn't shown up in the way I expected it to. So I would still probably be able to put him in as like an RB2 or an RB3, but I think you can usually find a better matchup or at least a better player to play as opposed to Freeman if you've got the chance. Now, if you don't, you should feel okay about playing Freeman this week.
Yeah, I think with that, like, he just doesn't have the ceiling right now. Because I mean, that offense, I don't understand how that offense hasn't been good this season. But I mean,
it doesn't really make any sense.
Outside of the one game where he got booted in LA, he's had 6 double-digit fantasy games in their last 8. Or in the last 8 that he's played. Obviously, he was injured over 2 of those games or over 2 of those weeks. So he's so involved in the receiving game that PPR, I think he's just very, very safe. I don't think you can really expect RB1 numbers, but I think RB2, yeah, absolutely. Especially this week with this matchup.
I can dig that.
It's kind of a nice segue into a question that we got. Kyle Senra here in the chat has asked us half-point PPR, start 3, Devontae Freeman, Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon, and Mark Ingram. So basically got to bench one of those guys. Boy, it's a tough call. What do you think, Stompy? We'll start with you. Who would you bench out of these 3? Or out of these 4, rather?
Woof. I think Ingram has the worst matchup, I believe. Maybe not. Buffalo has been pretty bad against the run.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's hard. Ingram is hard to sit at this point with how well that offense has been playing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and he has looked pretty dang good in basically every game this season, even in the matchups that aren't ideal, because Lamar Jackson has just given him so many opportunities. That run game is it's opening everything up for everybody. Man, that's tough. It'd be tough to sit in.
Yeah, It is tough, but when you look at the matchups here, Jacksonville over the last 5 weeks has given up the second most fantasy points per game to running backs. Obviously, we talked about Carolina with Devonta Freeman giving up the third most, and LA has given up the ninth most. The Chargers and Leonard Fournette is seeing 90% of the touches in that backfield. So, I mean, it's between Ingram and Freeman for me. Ingram hasn't been very much involved in the passing game, which is where my hesitation lies, because Buffalo, that's where they kind of get hurt, is through the air. They've allowed, I believe, the third most receptions to running backs. But I mean, Mark Ingram, not heavily involved in the passing game whatsoever. I mean, it's mostly tight ends and Hollywood Brown there. So it's between Freeman and Ingram for me. You probably got to go with Freeman then.
James, what do you think about I am agreeing with Stompy. I don't think you can sit Fournette, especially with the amount of targets that he is seeing, especially in the last 3 weeks. I mean, 7 targets, 12 targets, 11 targets. I mean, that is just, there aren't very many running backs that are getting that much opportunity in the pass game, let alone, he's turning him into basically 7 catches, 9 catches, 9 catches. I mean, there's just, Fournette to me, I feel like is kind of locked in at least at one of these spots. I mean, what do you think, James?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not benching Fournette here. To me, I agree with Stompy. It comes down to Mark Ingram or Devonta Freeman. Those are the two that I would consider, and I don't think you can go wrong. Really, either way. I mean, and any way you go, I think you're going to, kind of like you said earlier, Ethan, with the quarterbacks that we had, if you're going to lose this matchup, I don't think it's going to be because of your running backs, because you've got 4 good options. However, I think I would take the safer route, and I would probably take Mark Ingram. I think that running game is a little safer. So I think I would keep him in, and I would probably pass on Devonta Freeman. I would probably bench him. However, I wouldn't feel great about it because I think he has the bigger boom of the two between Ingram and Freeman. I think Freeman's involvement, like Stompy said, in the passing game, that's going to hurt, or that's going to help him. It's going to hurt Mark Ingram. However, I just feel like Mark Ingram has the safer floor, the higher floor, and so I would probably go with that if I'm looking at my third running back spot. So I think that's probably where I'd go, especially considering my other options. I feel like those guys are going to score points. I could go with that higher floor. So really an interesting question. This is a tough one, Kyle. I'm interested to see how you're Kyle, how you're going to go here, who you're going to sit, because this is a really tough decision.
Yeah, ultimately, I don't think he loses. I don't think he loses because of his running backs, because I don't think you can go wrong with any one of these guys. I feel like, me personally, I'm probably sitting Freeman. I'm going to go with the guys that have been producing all year. But I think that this is a week where you could see Freeman put up, one of those big weeks, especially in the pass game. So, again, my personal belief is that I tend to start the guys that I feel the most confident in getting me, consistent points. I tend to base I win with consistency. So that's how I like to play fantasy. I don't like to really waver as much on, expecting, okay, well, let's plan for this to be a huge game, even if the matchup is prime. I think that some people like to win that way, and I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think you can go wrong with any of these choices. I'm locking in Fournette. I'm locking in Melvin Gordon, and I'm going to go Mark Ingram as my RB3, which I'm feeling really good about. I mean, honestly, if it's my team, I'm like, this is a good problem to have.
So on the other side of the ball there in Atlanta, for Carolina, obviously CMC, obviously DJ Moore. How do you guys feel about Curtis Samuel this week? Atlanta has been that secondary is terrible, but Curtis Samuel's very touchdown dependent. I mean, he's been very involved in the red zone, but he's very touchdown dependent at this point. Do you trust him moving forward or this week?
I think it's tough to gauge what Carolina is going to do now that we have a head coaching change. That coaching staff is being kind of reshuffled and rearranged. It's hard to know what that offense is going to look like. It sounds like Kyle Allen is still going to be the guy. We heard some personnel decisions might be the reason why they wanted to kind of move on from Ron Rivera in season. And that's interesting because you don't know how that's going to affect some of these guys, especially, the depth chart and how that's going to look. So I would say proceed with caution. I like Curtis Samuel a lot. I think it's a good matchup. I would expect him to score some pretty decent points. However, again, it's really hard to know what to expect from this offense moving forward. So I guess I would approach it as, if I have a better option or a similar option, I'm probably going to bench Samuel this week just because I'm not sure what to expect from him. I'm not sure what to expect from Carolina's offense. The only piece that I'm willing to bank on is Christian McCaffrey, to be honest. Other than that, it's really hard to know. I like DJ Moore a lot. That's a guy that I would probably feel pretty comfortable too. But outside of those guys, I don't think there's a guy that I would feel great about, especially with, and Ethan, maybe you could speak to this, with Greg Olsen and that concussion. I'm not sure if he's going to play or not. That could affect Curtis Samuel's usage and target share as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect Olsen still hasn't practiced yet this week, which is not a good sign on Thursday night with a concussion. It only gives him 2 days to really clear concussion protocol. The interim coach actually came out and said that basically they're going to use a committee approach at tight end, which is not a good sign when you have a guy like Olsen who really doesn't deserve to be in a committee if he's playing. So I would not expect Greg Olsen to play this week. As far as the Curtis Samuel question, which I don't know. I just have a hard time with Samuel. Again, the coaching change means that I think we can trust certain aspects of this offense to be consistent. Your DJ Moores, your Christian McCaffreys are going to get theirs. DJ Moore, he's only gone over 60 yards 1, 2, 3, 4 times this year. He does have, some touchdown upside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 touchdowns on the year. So, that's pretty good. But again, I think he's going to end up being what he has been this year, which is a wide receiver 3 option. He's probably going to finish somewhere between number 30 and 30 and 40 in terms of wide receiver rankings. Maybe he gets into that wide receiver, low end wide receiver 2. But I just feel like, man, that's tough to bank on unless you're starting a ton of guys at wide receiver in your league. I just don't see a way that I couldn't find, at least 3 guys that I like more than Samuel on most of my playoff teams.
In fact, now that I've been thinking about it and talking about it, I just switched Alan Lazard in for Curtis Samuel. So, yeah, it's kind of rough. I mean, it's a good matchup, but it's just like you said, there's a lot of unknowns. Kyle Allen's still an unknown as well. So if there's a better matchup out there, I would probably be selecting some of those lesser wide receivers over Curtis Samuel this week. Another question in the chat here. We have Larry Monkey. Thanks for listening, Larry. Darius Geis or Benny Snell this week. The news from James Conner is that he will probably not play again this week. I'll let Ethan talk about that shoulder injury when we get to that game. But in the meantime, Darius Geis or Benny Snell this week. Darius Geis coming off of that explosion of a game last week.
Yeah, Geis came off that explosion. The problem is that he did it on 10 carries, and I mean that's ultra efficient. There's no way he can continue repeating that, right? And they kind of had a timeshare approach at running back. Adrian Peterson also, I think he went for just under 100 yards. So I think you can expect that going forward, and that's kind of a problem if you're banking on that type of efficiency from Geis. You're going to be disappointed more times than not. Whereas Benny Snell almost has the opposite problem. He's going to get 20 carries, but he's probably only going to get 80, 85 yards on it. He's not going to be as involved in the passing game either. So you worry a little bit kind of with both of them. I would lean Snell anytime I get a guy who's going to get more work, I'm going to lean that way. So that's the guy I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Snell here.
Not to mention that, and this is kind of something that talked about this last game. The Panthers, it was against the Panthers that they did that. Obviously a fantastic matchup. Not nearly the same matchup this week with Green Bay. Now they have not, Green Bay has not been good against running backs, but it's a worse matchup than they had last week. And I agree with James that it's a split backfield. You cannot trust that type, especially with Haskins back there, where you can stack the box like that with their secondary. I would not expect that type of efficiency against Green Bay. So I'm going to lean Snell. I'm going to go with Snell as well. We've seen in the last couple of games without James Conner, Benny Snell has gotten a large majority of the carries back there, and I would rather have the volume this week than the upside.
Yeah, Connor did get ruled out already for this week. So the volume is going to be there for Snell. I feel like the matchup is a little bit better. Arizona is not a bad defense, but again, not a good defense by any stretch. The team isn't winning, so they're obviously not stopping people from scoring. I would go Benny Snell. I am a Geis truther. This one's tough for me because I'm a Steelers fan, and I'm also a big Geis guy. I really do I liked him coming into the league. I think he was either my RB2 or RB. I think I ended up with him as my RB3 after Chubb and Barkley, but before Sony Michel. So I have been a believer in Geis for a long time. So to me, I think you got to go with the volume here. Green Bay they're also not a good defense against the run. They're giving up over 100 yards, rushing yards a game. I think that, they're bottom 10 in the league as far as I know, and against the run, which isn't. It's not a bad matchup, but again, if you're only getting 10 carries, you're basically hoping for that big run from Geis. We've seen it now since he's returned. He's needed, some big plays to basically make it where it is good to see that he's getting some carries on the goal line. So maybe Geis has, maybe we see that split getting closer to 60-40. I do think Geis has looked pretty good from what I've seen watching him play, but he's not going to get the volume that Benny Snell is, and I think that game script is going to have Snell basically dominating touches in this game. So I'm going to go Snell, but man, it's hard because I love Geis. I love me some Geis, man. And it's exciting to watch him play.
And that matchup, is very good, but it would be a lot better with a better quarterback.
Yeah.
Dwayne Haskins doesn't really serve much in terms of a threat this year. So, and obviously the Green Bay Packers should be listening to me. And if you're hiring, I will come live in Green Bay. I'm sure my girlfriend, the Green Bay Packers fan, would love that. But they would be well advised to what just happened?
What?
Well, my computer did something weird. But they would be well advised to stack the box and make Dwayne Haskins beat them, which I don't think will happen. Which won't happen, and they're going to stop the run. Larry made a good point. You got to keep Rodgers off the field, but when you're going to be getting 2-3 yards a carry because you have 8 men in the box, you're not going to keep him off the field. So, that's where I'm at with that one. We had another question here from Kyle Sinra. Do we like Curtis Samuel more than Christian Kirk against Pittsburgh? That's a good question. Yes, I think Christian Kirk's been more involved after he got healthy. But
now Stompy's glitching out a little bit. Maybe the computer is getting him.
Yeah, while we're waiting on Stompy to fix that issue, what do you think, Ethan? Where are you at as far as this goes? Would you start Curtis Samuel over Christian Kirk?
I probably wouldn't personally. Just my opinion again. I think Kirk is going to give you more upside. We've seen Kirk getting. I think again, game script is going to have Arizona behind in this game. You know, when they're behind, Kirk has been being fed targets. I mean, he's got 12 targets twice, 11 targets, 10 targets, 9 targets. I mean, the volume is definitely there. And we've seen him blow up in games this year, which I think at this point in the fantasy season, if you're choosing between basically wide receiver threes, give me the one that I has the most upside to give you that huge game-winning week. You know, Christian Kirk has a game where he had 138 yards and 3 touchdowns on the year. I mean, I definitely feel like Kirk is the better ceiling play for sure. So I'd probably lean Kirk pretty hard. Curtis Samuel has the better matchup of the two, but I think game script is going to be in Kirk's favor.
I will say that I saw a tweet earlier today from I'm going to mess this up. Michelle Majuk. I think that's how you say it. At Ball Blast them. They were looking at the top 5 cornerbacks, and I'm looking for it now, and I'm not finding it. But there it is. There are 28 cornerbacks that have played 400 plus coverage snaps. Top 5 fewest yards allowed. Nelson for Pittsburgh, 314 yards, 81 yards after catch, 1 touchdown, and Joe Hayden 359 yards and 83 yards after catch, 3 touchdowns. So they have 2 basically shutdown cornerbacks this season. Yeah, I mean that's the big issue here for me. Pittsburgh has been extremely good, especially since they got Minkah Fitzpatrick against wide receivers or against the pass. So that's my hesitation here is Pittsburgh has been able to shut down wide receivers pretty well, and they don't throw. I mean, I guess do you trust Kirk in that situation? So it comes down to matchups for me, and I like the Atlanta matchup better, so I would lean Samuel here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there's definitely some question marks regarding Samuel just because we don't really know his role. But again, I do think that, you know, this is a good matchup for Carolina. If, like, you know, Ethan had told us, it sounds like Greg Olson's going to miss the game. Well, they're going to be hurting for pass catchers. And I lean a little bit more towards Samuel just because of the matchup. However, I do recognize, like Ethan said, you know, Kirk has the higher ceiling in my opinion. So if you're looking for that guy, maybe if you're not favored in your matchup, maybe Kirk is the way to go because he could, you know, he has that higher ceiling, but I think he also has a lower floor. I don't know that you can expect to get from him what you're going to get from Samuel in a conservative type role, type setting. So if you're looking for a safe, I would go Curtis Samuel. If you're looking for upside, I think I'd go Kirk. So I guess it just kind of depends on your matchup and what you're looking for. I think this is close enough that I would play it that way. Stompy, sorry. While you're figuring it out.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm an idiot. We got to get going here. We have talked about one game, so we got to, and we've been talking for almost an hour, so we need to start flying through these a little bit. Baltimore Ravens at Buffalo Bills. Over under is 44 here. Probably going to be relatively low scoring, I suppose. I mean, the Ravens have scored the most fantasy points on the season, but this is going to be a tough matchup. It's two teams that rely heavily on the run game, 2 running quarterbacks. So, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that we're starting Ingram for the most part. We've already discussed that. We're starting Lamar Jackson very obviously. How do we feel about the pass catchers there? Mark Andrews, Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to sit Mark Andrews unless you're really loaded at tight end. I think it's going to be difficult to sit. I mean, the touchdown upside, he's really looked upon in the red zone greatly, and he gets a lot of the targets, and a lot of the tight ends there in Baltimore are questionable. Nick Boyle is a guy who sees a lot of time there on the field too, and he's questionable in this game, so I'm not sure if he's going to play. I could see Mark Andrews' snap share going up, and I could see his target share being about the same as usual. He's just such a threat in the red zone that I think you'd be hard pressed to sit him. Marquise Brown is interesting. I think I really like his upside. However, I think I would probably be looking at a better option if I could. Obviously, again, this is another guy who has a high ceiling, though. If you're looking for a boom guy, if you're looking for a guy that, hey, look, I'm the 6 seed, I'm going against a 3 seed, and I'm a 30-point dog, maybe that's the guy that you want to play because he has that upside of, one big 80-yard touchdown catch could make your day. So, yeah, it's interesting. They're both interesting plays this week. I think I'd avoid one, but Mark Andrews is a guy who I'd be comfortable putting in my my lineup weekly.
Yeah, I would agree with those. Sorry, I went to say something. I was going to pull a Stompy and start talking into a muted mic. I think Andrews is a good start. This game could get ugly weather-wise. They're talking about maybe there's about a 40% chance of rain, so that's what I was looking up right there. So that could play a factor for sure. And as far as passing stats go, I think it would benefit Baltimore more because I think they're a better running team. Just with Lamar Jackson, with Mark Ingram, than it would Buffalo. But I think we could see a lot of guys on the ground right here, or a lot of yards on the ground, not so much through the air. That's going to hurt a guy like Josh Allen. Or maybe it will help him. I don't know. That big arm, he's kind of built to throw in Buffalo in those kind of not ideal conditions. So I think must starts, you got to start Lamar Jackson. There's just no doubt with me. I think Mark Andrews is the same way. I think Ingram is a maybe, depending on matchup. Again, if we're talking as your RB3, yeah, go after it. RB2, go after it. If he's your RB1, you're probably going to have to start him, but I wouldn't feel as comfortable. I don't expect him to finish as an RB1 this week. As far as other guys in Buffalo, I think Singletary is worth a start. And then outside of that, John Brown, Smokey Brown has played well, but we'll see if the conditions. I think if Lamar Jackson takes over this game like we've seen him do multiple times this year, Smokey Brown could have a big game just because they're playing catch up. So I think he's a guy that I would feel comfortable starting as a wide receiver too. But outside of that, I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there's any guy on here that I'm definitely in no scenario would you start. I feel like the big players you can make a pretty good case for.
On the Buffalo side, Ethan already talked about Josh Allen, already talked about many of the Buffalo guys. Are we avoiding the wide receivers there? John Brown, who's been heavily involved, Cole Beasley, who's not been as heavily involved, but has been getting touchdowns. The Ravens, after trading for Marcus Peters, have been a lot better against wide receivers over the past 5 weeks. They've allowed they're middle of the pack in terms of allowing fantasy points to wide receivers, not allowing gigantic games by any means. I mean, Mohamed Sanu had a relatively big game, Julian Edelman as well, but other than that, not too many huge games from the wide receivers against Baltimore. So are you starting John Brown? Is John Brown a must start at this juncture in the season?
Yeah, I think he is. I think until he proves to you that he's not gonna get you the points that he has been. I mean, what's it been? It's been like 8 straight games where he's gotten 50 yards or something like that. I thought I saw. I mean, he has been just consistently good this season. So it's with that being said, it's hard to sit him. Cole Beasley is hard to sit too. I think if I had to pick one to sit, it would be Beasley. Like you mentioned, Stompy, he has touchdown upside. But I think John Brown has all around upside, and I think that's the allure to him. They move him around a lot. They do a lot of different things in formations too that they can get him away from Peters. But man, I mean, this is a really tough call. I have a tough call with Devin Singletary too, because Baltimore's been a whole lot better against the run as of late. And, Devin Singletary's been good too, but boy, I don't know that I really feel all that comfortable starting him this week either. So it really is interesting. I expect this to be a fun game. But I think John Brown and Josh Allen are guys that I'm comfortable starting, and Cole Beasley and Devin Singletary are kind of, those are yellow lights for me, guys. Those are guys that, man, if I have to start them, I'll start them and I'll feel okay about it, but I really don't feel great about it. But I think John Brown and Josh Allen are green lights for me in this match.
All right, fair enough. Moving on to our next matchup here, Cincinnati Bengals at Cleveland Browns, the battle of the two worst teams in the AFC North. Is that right, James?
Record-wise, yes, that is correct. Record-wise, that would be correct. Man, oh man, that's brutal.
The over-under here is 43, which that's a little rough, man. I mean, Cincinnati's defense has not been good, so that's kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a gross game. If I'm really thinking about it, this is kind of a gross game.
Really, see, to me, I don't feel like it is. Okay, so last week Cincinnati started Andy Dalton, and they kind of found their offense, right? I mean, I feel like they did. Mixon looked good. Boyd was there. Tate put up numbers. Even Eifert kind of showed a little bit of life. So to me, it's kind of like Cincinnati kind of has this offensive rebirth, and their defense isn't great. So I expect Cleveland to be able to score at least somewhat. So I think the over here is screaming my name. So if I were a betting man, I'd like the over, which means I kind of like some of the fantasy options here. I think we hit on a little bit earlier, Stompy. The running backs for Cleveland is really where you want to hit, and I would kind of avoid the wide receivers. So I'm just going to say this right away. I agree with you there. I think if I'm banking on Cleveland, I'm banking on those running backs, Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and I don't know that I'm doing much with the receivers or with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I mean, unfortunately, Kareem Hunt does exist, so Chubb has not been involved in the passing game. But Chubb at this point is matchup proof on the ground. He's such a force rushing the ball that you cannot sit him ever. Not that this would be the time to sit him, because Cleveland's defense has not been fantastic this season, but I think one of their bigger weaknesses has been against the run, though they have been better of late. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's ever a hesitation with starting Nick Chubb. Do you have any? I mean, Ethan, do you have any qualms with OB? I mean, we talked about OBJ earlier. We didn't talk too much about Landry, but as I mentioned, Cincinnati has been sneakily one of the better teams against wide receivers this season.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough for me, because I feel like this could be a team that could be a game that OBJ just balls out. And this offense looks really, really good because the Bengals aren't tremendously good, but they have been deceptively. And here's the other thing. I feel like the rumblings that we're hearing about OBJ wanting out, something I think is they're not gelling. He's not gelling with Baker Mayfield. It's clear on the field production wise. I think their personalities probably clash a little bit, or a lot of bit. I think that Mayfield is kind of rubbing it, shoving him off to the side and going with Landry. And I think I think we see more of that than we do of him going towards Odell. And I guess to me, I haven't seen anything this year that would suggest that OBJ is going to have this huge game. And I'm basing it off solely that his talent at some point, at any point, could show out, and then he could just absolutely take over a game. He's that talented. But we haven't seen really that OBJ this season too much. So if I had to bet, I would go Landry is going to be the guy that has the big game again, just because I think him and Mayfield have a better connection. But I don't think you can ever completely count OBJ out. I think it is worth noting. This is a side note, but it really affects my IDP league. But Sam Hubbard for Cincinnati, who's been a pretty elite defensive end / tackle for them, has not practiced yet this week. It's looking like he might miss this game. So that's just more incentive to play Chubb. If Cincinnati is out, I mean, he is that Sam Hubbard. If you guys, I know that most people are not IDP players, but if you're not paying attention to this team because they're bad, Sam Hubbard has been really, really, really good this year. So, if he is out, that could be a huge loss for Cincinnati's D line. So that's worth noting as far as Chubb and Kamara go, or as Kareem Hunt. Sorry.
Don't you dare sully the name of Alvin Kamara.
I'm sorry. I meant Kareem Hunt. They start with K's. I'm sorry. There's A's and there's R's and they're just whatever. Just you know what I meant.
He's my guy. Look at this. He's my guy.
That's so
man,
cute.
Look at that. That's what's looking grumpy as he records.
That's adorable.
I also have a signed helmet of him.
All right, I'm a little jealous of the signed helmet. I'm not gonna lie.
You go.
But real quick, I do want to add something as far as the OBJ thing goes. I don't know what you guys took away from that interview, and I don't know if you guys kind of saw it at all. But my big takeaway was OBJ said he basically he wouldn't want to be anywhere else than Cleveland right now with Jarvis Landry, but in the offseason, he doesn't know if he'll want to be there. He'll face that when it comes. And I think, to me, that means, is this coach going to be here? Because if the coach is going to be here, I don't want to be here. I really feel like that's kind of the message here, was that, like, hey, I don't fit into this system. This coach has lost his team. He's lost his locker room. And, like, I can't tell you how I'm going to feel next season. I'll cross that path when I come to it. I really feel like the writing's on the wall, is that, like, hey, yeah, I would really like to play here with Landry. I would be fine playing here, but maybe under a different coach. So I'll tell you how I feel after the offseason. Kind of that's the way I took it. I'm not too sure, but there's definitely something brewing there, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But for the time being, you're right. I mean, it's hard to bank on Odell Beckham doing anything based off of what we've seen so far.
I'm hoping that Cleveland realizes the mistake they made in hiring a coach who had called 8 games total in his career as a coordinator. And then you bring in an offensive coordinator who has a very successful resume, and you don't give him the play call. Really? So I might.
Bad teams do bad things, Stompy.
Oof.
Hey.
The facts of
That's
life.
enough. That's enough, Ethan.
Not everyone can have a coaching guru like Mike Tomlin leading the charge, okay?
Why are you talking to me like that?
Not everyone can do. Oh, sorry. I meant
I'm a Broncos
James.
fan, bro. James,
Yeah.
Cleveland Browns fan.
James.
Mike Tomlin is a good head coach.
Yep, that's all I needed to hear. Okay, we can move on. Next matchup.
And my computer's freezing again. Bye.
Perfect.
Yeah, your computer's
Stompy.
freezing. You know why it's freezing? Because I just said Mike Tomlin's a good freaking head coach.
Yep.
That's why.
Put it down. I'm putting that as my ringtone.
Oh my gosh.
My ringtone on my phone. Every time you message me on Twitter.
It's not worth
Mike
it.
Tomlin is a good head coach, okay?
Don't do it. It's not worth it.
I'm back.
All right. So
I'm not editing any of this out, by the way.
Good. What
So you guys, this is how you make this sausage.
We're doing it live, okay?
Well, we didn't talk about Cincinnati here.
Do we have to?
Joe Mixon.
They're terrible.
How do you feel about Joe Mixon this week? Cleveland Browns, like I said, have been better against the run. Over the last 5 weeks, they have allowed the third fewest fantasy points to running backs. How do you feel about Joe Mixon this week?
I think he's probably going to end up as a mid-level RB2, and that's worth starting on most fantasy teams for me, at least.
Yep, I agree. I got him right there.
That's pretty much it. I think, he's always got the fact that he's used in the passing game as much as he is. He's always going to be able to bank on that. Kind of the same argument that I make for Devonta Freeman. Even when they're not playing super well, the pass game is going to give them a safe enough floor that I think you can play him every week.
And then, like James said, I mean, Andy Dalton, I get what they were doing.
The resurgence of Andy Dalton.
I get what they were doing. I do. But Andy Dalton has been an okay QB throughout his career. And very obviously, the pass catchers are better with Andy Dalton. So on Tate, been a decent receiver this season. I don't know if I necessarily trust him against Cleveland in that secondary. Tyler Boyd's a must start, I believe. They do have the outside corners, but I don't think Cleveland really has a slot corner to match with Tyler Boyd. Plus, Andy Dalton feeds Tyler Boyd. So would you guys be starting on Tate? I'm hoping that you have better wide receivers, but if you don't have better wide receivers, would you be starting on Tate this week?
Normally I would, but John Ross is coming back this week. He's coming off of IR, and I think that kind of throws a wrinkle in my Auden Tate. Any kind of love that I had for him, I just don't feel like this offense can support two solid wide receivers, especially when you got Tate, Erickson, and Ross kind of all vying for that wide receiver too. I think Tate has proven enough this year to justify that he should end up with more targets, but John Ross started really hot before he got hurt. So, I think Tyler Boyd is probably the only must start of the three. I don't think you can trust John Ross in his first game back. They said they're going to ease him back in, but again, what does that mean for NFL coaches? It can mean anything. So I think Tyler, I would go Boyd, Tate, Ross if I'm picking, the order that I expect the targets to be distributed. Maybe Tyler Eifert if you're like really hurting at tight end, which I feel like pretty much everybody is. But even then, I don't love it. So I would say Boyd's the only one that you're for sure starting, and I'd probably try to sit the rest of them if I could.
I would not be touching the tight ends for Cincinnati with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with everything Ethan just said. Boyd's the must start. He's my green-white here for Cincinnati. Tate would be a yellow-white and a play if you absolutely need to. And then that's about it. John Ross, I kind of want to take a wait-and-see approach, but it could very well affect Auden Tate. So that's why he's a yellow-white and closer to a red-white than a green-white for me.
And, I mean, what does that make Andy Dalton this week? He's got to be a yellow-white, right? I mean, he's been decent. You're not expecting that ceiling, but I mean, he's going to give you some points. So yeah, I think I agree there. There's probably better options out there, but he's got a decent floor. So if you need him as like a QB2 in your super flex leagues, not the worst start in the world. Moving on here, Washington at Green Bay. I will not say Washington's mascot because it needs to be gone, but at Green Bay Packers, Packers are are giving 14 points on this game. Over unders 42. So that means that Washington's going to score single-digit fantasy points this week, according to the line. We've already talked about Darius Geis. Very good matchup for both AP and Darius Geis, but they are splitting that backfield. It is a running back by committee right now
with Chris Thompson.
And Chris Thompson
whenever he wants to decide.
Yeah. So while they have been running the ball more, while Darius Geis did break out last week, like I said, the Dwayne Haskins does not prove to be much of a threat right now in the passing game. Plus, Green Bay has those outside cornerbacks. They've kind of been not great the second half of the season, but when you only have Terry McLaurin to really worry about, I'm not overly worried about that. So honestly, probably not starting anybody if I can. Darius Geis, not the worst start, but I'm not starting anybody for Washington. What do you guys think?
I would say Geis and AP, if you have one or the other, could both be yellow lights, but outside of that, that's pretty much it.
Dwayne Haskins has absolutely killed this offense.
Yeah, he's terrible, and that's the thing is that I don't think I feel comfortable starting anyone in this offense. I will give a yellow light to both running backs just because it is a good matchup, but other than that, I mean, I can't even feel good about starting Terry McLaurin because, like you said, I mean, has it been brutal at the quarterback position? And I never thought I would say this phrase, but man, do I miss Case Keenum because he fed McLaurin, and they had some really nice chemistry. But since he's been out and it's been it's gone to Haskins, it's been rough sledding. So yeah, I don't feel comfortable starting any Redskins outside of those guys that I have as yellow lights. Those two running backs there.
On the other side of the ball, obviously Aaron Rodgers is a start. Obviously Devontae Adams is a start. We have Jamal Williams was downgraded to questionable today. I didn't see exactly what it was. I don't know if you can give us more there, Ethan.
I'll look it up.
What's interesting about the running backs in Green Bay is that Aaron Jones has not been consistent this season. He has 2 monster games and another fantastic game, but he also has 4 single-digit games, including in each of the last 2 games. So it's just really hard to trust him, and he's scored in 6 of the last 7 games. He has scored. Or he has not scored. He scored 3 touchdowns in week 10, and then outside of that, he hasn't scored in 6 of the last 7. So I don't know how to feel about Aaron Jones in this one. I don't know how to feel about Jamal Williams in this one either. It's hard to sit either of them, but at the same time, it's like, well, the stats are not there.
I think given the matchup, I think both these guys are at a minimum a yellow light. I would probably put Jones at a green light personally. I just think that with Williams hobbled, we've seen that Jones has his best games when Williams isn't involved at all. So when they're both involved, they both kind of basically pilfer each other's fantasy value. But I think it sounds like it's a knee injury. There really isn't much about it. There usually isn't much when it comes to these injuries that happen in the middle of the week. Never a good sign for a player to get downgraded in the middle of the week because 1, you don't know what happened. 2, you're not really going to find out. And 3, that means they have even less time to recover before the game. So I think there's at least an outside chance that Williams doesn't play. And in that case, I think that Jones could be a green light because I think Green Bay is going to just smoke these guys. Washington has basically caught a couple teams got off guard. But for the most part, they're pretty bad. So.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable starting either of these backs, to be honest. But if I was going to start one, it would be Jones. Like Ethan said, with Williams kind of, a little banged up, I would say that Aaron Jones is likely to be the one of the two that breaks out if one does. My only problem is that I haven't seen it. It just hasn't been there as of late, and I don't know what to expect. I could expect this to be a low-scoring game. Like you said, the over-under Stompy isn't very high, and I don't know that I expect Green Bay to totally light up Washington. I think they're going to beat them pretty handily, but that could be because Washington scores 6 points, and it could be 21-6 or 20-6 or something like that. And the game's never in doubt, but it's just not a high-scoring game. So to me, I don't know that I feel comfortable starting either of them. I do think Ethan brings up a good point. Game script would suggest that the running game maybe later in the game takes precedent here, but we know kind of how Aaron Rodgers works. They'll run it on 1st and 2nd down, and if it's 3rd and manageable, it'll be a play action pass. He'll pick up the 1st down, and they'll just milk more clock, or it'll be a hard snap count. Someone he'll draw somebody off sides, something like that. That he'll just find ways to keep drives alive, or he'll use his own legs to do it. So. That's just it for me. Is that I just don't know how much I expect out of these backs. So I think I'd be more comfortable benching them. But again, you have to have a better option. So if you have a better option than Aaron Jones, I think I would roll with it.
Well, so if Jamal Williams, though, does sit out this game, you have to start Aaron Jones, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's going to get 100% of the volume out of that backfield. So, interesting question, though, because of the over-under and because of probably the game script. How do we feel about any of the tertiary options, pass catching options for Green Bay? It seems that Alan Lazard has basically taken over as the wide receiver 2 in Aaron Rodgers' eyes, though maybe the snap share isn't there. He just seems to be getting the second most targets among the wide receivers. I don't trust MVS. I don't trust Geronimo Allison because they're just not getting the targets. What do we feel about Alan Lazard this week?
Yeah, I personally, the only two pass catchers I'd feel comfortable starting are Devontae Adams and Allen Lazard. There's nobody at tight end or no other wide receivers that I feel comfortable starting week after week. Even in this matchup against Washington, those are the only two guys I would look at. So I feel pretty good if I have Allen Lazard. I think he's a yellow light. And right in the middle of that yellow light's there. So I think if you're using him as a flex option, that's right about where I'd want my flex to be. I'd feel comfortable using him this week. I think.
Yeah, I would say Adams is green light. Lazard seems to be the second option now. I don't know really what happened with MVS. He isn't being used at all anymore. Like he disappeared off the face of the planet. Like I thought that earlier in the year it looked like he was going to be the guy, and then to be that number 2 option, and then he just disappeared. He had one huge game in week 7 on 2 catches, but he hasn't had more than 3 targets since week 4. So again, I don't know. Rodgers tends to put people in the doghouse. So if Lazard is the guy that has his eye right now, I think that he's at least a yellow light. And that's pretty much it besides Adams.
All right. So you guys are going to help me set I already talked about this. Alan Lazard or Curtis Samuel this week?
Lazard for me.
You're going to help me win SFB 9.
That's it? Those are the only 2 options you have at wide
receiver? Well, I have Kenny Stills, but he's going up against Denver.
No, you can't do that.
And then I had Randall Cobb. Or I could start Noah Fant, but I'm not doing that.
Oh, yeah, don't do that. I would say Lazard just because I think Rodgers could have a pretty prime game as far as touchdowns scored. So,
all right.
I think you go Lazard. Me personally,
that's
higher
what I
upside, and in Scott Fishbowl, you got to score some points, man. So, I think that's your best shot. If you lose, I don't want to hear it.
I'm gonna come to you. All right, on to our next matchup. 2 other NFC North teams here: Detroit at Minnesota. Vikings are 14-point favorites. Is that right? I'm taking the super under on that. Jesus. Over under is 42.5. I don't know if I agree with that either. God, maybe I should start betting. That is a horrendous line. But it's story of 2 bad secondaries here. Is Matt Stafford going to play, Ethan?
It's not looking that way. Actually, I cannot remember. I don't think so.
I would love for him to come back, but I doubt it.
I don't think they're going to bring him back. I think he's going to end up on the IR. If it's not this week, it's next week. Patricia came out and said earlier this week that he's still week to week. That means he's not going to play this week, most likely. So right. I would not expect Stafford back. It is a David Blow game.
Is it Blow? Is it Bluff? Is it
Blau? I believe.
Blau? Is it
Blog?
Is it Blog?
Blue.
Anyway, 2 bad secondaries. Like I said, last 5 weeks, Detroit Lions have given up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers. The Minnesota Vikings have given up the 3rd most points to wide receivers. Detroit didn't look terrible against Chicago, even with David Blau at quarterback. And Kenny Galladay on my bench and Marvin Jones on my bench in multiple leagues. Both had good fantasy days. So you would expect them to put up decent fantasy days against the Minnesota Vikings defense or secondary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, to an extent.
I mean, they should do something. I think you could see both guys being at least wide receiver 2s minimum. You throw a touchdown or 2 in there, then you're looking at wide receiver 1 numbers for one or both. So, yeah, I would feel at least. I would say Galladay of the 2, Galladay is the green light. But I still think that Marvin Jones he's been playing very well the last few weeks. So
I don't have a problem starting either of those dudes, especially at like a wide receiver 3 or later.
I saw another tweet. I think it was earlier this week that Jones is getting a higher, target share than Kenny Galladay since Matt Stafford has been out, which I would have to confirm that, but if not higher, close to even. So Marvin Jones has become very viable with Matt Stafford out here. What do we feel about like guys like Danny Amendola and I guess those tertiary pass catchers, so J.D. McKissick as well, and then we can talk about the running back, and I just forgot his name.
Scarborough?
Yeah, Bo Scarborough.
LeGarrette Blount 2.0. How can you not love LeGarrette Blount 2.0?
He's a big boy.
He's a big boy.
I liked him coming out because that dude is athletic.
Athletic and horrendously. You want to talk about a dude that came in with a long injury history. He's the dude.
Oh,
lots of issues.
That tweet that I was talking about came from your former podcast partner there, Derek Brown.
Derek Brown. Shout out to D-Bro. Love that.
Yeah, at _FFB, comparing Marvin Jones and Galladay since Matthew Stafford has been sidelined. Target share, Marvin Jones 19% to Galladay 16%. Their ADOT. Marvin Jones is 13.1. Kenny Galladay is 15.5. Air yards is about even. There's a gap of 4 yards. Red zone targets. Marvin Jones 4 to Kenny Galladay's 2. So both
Marvin Jones may just be good at football.
Oh, he's been very good at football.
He's been good. Underrated.
So both are extremely viable in fantasy. Both are starters this week. I'm not really trusting Amendola this week. Hawkinson is on IR. I don't think you can trust. Was it Michael? What's his face and some other guys back there that I don't know their names. So I'm not really trusting the tight end situation there. J.D. McKissick, since Scarborough's taken over, has not really been as involved here. So really for me, Scarborough's probably an okay start against Minnesota because of volume, but I'm not really loving the matchup there. So it's really Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones for me. And that in turn means that David Bluff is also a start, especially in Superflex.
Yeah, I think in Superflex you feel comfortable starting him. Absolutely. I do kind of want to shift gears here and ask Ethan a question on the other side of the ball, and that's for the Vikings. Adam Thielen, what's going on? Are we expecting Adam Thielen to suit up? I've heard all sorts of different conflicting reports on whether or not people expect him to go. So what do you think, Ethan? Does Adam Thielen go?
He's been dealing with a hamstring injury for a few weeks now. They're not openly ruling him out. I think it's looking like, practice. He hasn't practiced yet. And that is always, if he's not practicing, that means that thing isn't feeling good yet. And we're on to Thursday. If he doesn't get a practice in tomorrow, I think there's a good chance he doesn't play, which isn't ideal. Zimmer has come out and said that he thinks there's a good chance he plays. So, again, I'm kind of, the hardest thing I have to do is decide if a guy's going to play or not when I basically only have the information that everyone else has. I think that there is a chance he plays, but it is going to be a true game time decision And if there's any reason for them to, you're most likely going to re-injure a hamstring strain the first week you come back. The minute you come back, you go full speed, you pop it again. And that is, this team has seen with Dalvin Cook last season what happens when you try to rush a guy back from a hamstring. They're still playing well without Thielen. I could really see this being one that it comes down to the game time and they go, you know what? I think we can win this game without him. The Lions aren't very good. Let's go one more week without him and make sure that, as we're hopefully heading towards the playoffs, we've got a full arsenal at 100% or as close to it as possible. So I think he's going to be a game time decision. I would not be surprised if they sit him one more week.
Can we talk about Darius Slay as well? I mean, that's obviously going to have an impact on the Minnesota Vikings wide receivers. He has been out over the past few weeks. I don't know if he will be playing this week. And if not, I think Diggs has to be an auto start regardless, but if Diggs or if Slay isn't back there, then I think both Diggs and Olabisi Johnson are very good starts this week.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you got to have someone to throw the ball to. Diggs last week disappointed a little bit. I expect him to bounce back nicely this week, even if Thielen plays. But if Thielen is out, especially, and Olabisi again becomes the number 2 pass catching option. I don't hate Kyle Rudolph either. I mean, he's been seeing an increased amount of snaps of targets too since Adam Thielen's been down, and I could see him kind of benefiting from that too. He's really been good in the red zone as well. So it wouldn't shock me if he had a decent game as well here. Detroit's not great against the pass. I think they're 20th against the pass right now. So, that's a way that you can beat this team, especially, we'll see if Dalvin Cook's 100%. If he isn't, that could mean more passing attempts for Kirk Cousins, which is why I like him an awful lot this week. I think he's a green light for me.
Yeah, it looks like Slay has been playing.
Yeah. Oh no, it was just, I don't know what I was thinking. He was ruled out in week 8. It's now week 14. Idiot.
I was gonna say it looked like he missed a game in week 8, but no, he has been playing. So Slay should be at full capacity for this game.
Not well, apparently.
Well, again, I don't follow the defensive side as closely, so I don't think that the secondary has played well for a while now. So with Slay, I would say that I think Diggs is startable this week. I think he could put up a good game. I think that Cousins is startable this week. Cook, obviously, you got to green light Cook every week. There's no doubt. The injury is a little concerning. If he plays, let's put it that way. If he plays, you got to start him. But and I would say, man, it looks like he's leaning towards playing. That is, I think Madison, because of the questions around Dalvin Cook right now, I think Madison, is probably a yellow light, maybe even closer to a green light, because I think that there's a chance Dalvin Cook doesn't get a full set of games. But they seem pretty optimistic that Cook is going to be 100% for this game. He's been dealing with a chest/shoulder injury. We know that he's had a lot of shoulder issues in the past. So this is where that injury history comes into play. And Dalvin Cook is one of those guys that every week you have to just kind of remember in the back of your head, like, he could blow up for you. He could be out in the first series with an injury. He still has not shaken that history that he came in, the first few years in the league that he's had. So I think you got to start Dalvin Cook if he plays. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. And I think Alexander Madison could see, significant enough work to justify, an RB2 or RB3 slot on a playoff team.
One of the interesting starts here is, or questions here, is Kyle Rudolph. Now hasn't been heavily targeted, but been very effective of late. I mean, double-digit fantasy points in each of the last 4 games, 5 touchdowns in the last 4 games, 6 touchdowns in the last 6.
Since Thielen's gone down, he's been startable.
Right. So yeah, since week 7, he's been extremely startable. And while Detroit has been good of late against tight ends, I would think that I think Kyle Rudolph is a start at this point. He seems to be the second or maybe the third option behind Dalvin Cook and Stephon Diggs in this offense.
Yeah. I mean, definitely in the red zone at a minimum. And with tight ends, I think that's you're banking on touchdowns for the most part. A touchdown to a tight end, even if they're not getting a ton of looks, is good enough to put them in tight end 1 category.
100%.
I think someone tweeted out that Darren Waller scored like 7 points last week and was a tight end 1 on the week. So
it was 2. It was Ryan McDowell
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks
McDowell,
ago.
that's right. McDowell put that out there. So I mean, the tight end position is so bad. So
there's been a lot of injuries out there, a lot of disappointing stuff going on too. So
yeah. So I would say yeah. I think that he's a startable.
All right, let's knock a few of these out here because
can I say one more thing about this game?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I know we're talking. I know, but here I just need to put this out there because I think it's worth noting. Kerryon Johnson returned to practicing this week. Now, Kerryon Johnson is slated to return at the earliest week 16. For most teams, this is a non-factor. Most teams will not be in the playoffs at that point. Or they could be, it's the championship game, basically. If you have a league that plays into week 17, it is worth picking up Kerryon Johnson right now. If he is on your waiver wire, it is worth picking him up and stashing him just in case you get to. I wouldn't trust him week 16 if he plays, but if you go into week 17, he's a guy that could see snaps. The team is bad, but there's still a chance that Kerryon Johnson could play, and I think you got to take that risk. So I just want to throw that out there because I'm the injury guy, so I'm just trying to keep everybody up to date with these things. But yeah, worth picking up if you play into week 17.
It seems like James is having some internet issues, so it's Ethan and I for the time being, maybe for the rest of the podcast. So we apologize for that. Next game, San Francisco 49ers at New Orleans Saints. As San Francisco starts to play into the tougher part of their schedule, where you're starting to find some flaws here. New Orleans, their defense has become extremely stout lately, and that's both in the secondary and against the run. So there's not a lot to love for San Francisco this week, in my opinion. I don't think Jimmy G's a good start this week. Of course, I don't think Jimmy G's a good start most weeks because I don't like Jimmy G. But is there anybody that you really? I mean, I guess George Kittle's about the only one that I really trust at this point because even last week, I mean, Tevin Coleman, the starting running back, got 6 touches to Raheem Mostert's 21.
Yeah, this one's tough. Mostert, I guess, could be a yellow light. I know the matchup isn't great, but it seems like they're pretty confident in him. Man, that's tough to trust anybody in that backfield, though. That Matt Breida, again, if in doubt, trust none of them, and just live with that. The only other guy that I think is worth maybe discussing is Deebo Samuel. I know he's a rookie. I know it's hard to trust rookies in fantasy, but man, this guy has been pretty darn good here for the last few weeks. I'm looking up some stats right now, but I think if you're going to yellow light at least one guy in this passing offense, it could be Deebo. We'll see who they put on him as far as matchups go. But I mean, just looking at his last 4 weeks, basically, he had 112 yards receiving, 134 yards receiving, 50 yards and a touchdown, 41 yards and a touchdown. So a touchdown or over 100 yards receiving in each of his last 4 games. So, I mean, I think that's worthy of at least yellow light consistency or yellow light consideration. Outside of that, I'm not really trusting. And Kittle, I mean, you got to start Kittle, but outside of that, I'm not really trusting anybody.
100%. And then on the other side of the ball, Latavius Murray is an absolute sit. Other than that, I think you're starting Kamara, you're starting Michael Thomas. I don't know if I really want to start Drew Brees.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's
because
really,
this San Francisco defense is still pretty darn good, especially against the pass.
So, yeah, I mean, if you have better options out there, I might not be starting Drew Brees this week. Because while San Francisco has definitely given up more fantasy points of late to QBs, they shut down Aaron Rodgers. Really, the only ones that have been putting up decent points are the guys who can run the ball. I mean, Kyler Murray put up 2 20-point plus games. Lamar Jackson obviously put up a 20-plus point game. But other than that, they've been very good against the pass. So I don't know how to feel here. I really don't. I would say that back into QB1 at best for Drew Brees. I don't think you're going to sit him in super flex leagues, but still not the best matchup here.
Yeah, I agree. This is, I think it's arguably the worst matchup. I mean, their last 3 games, they're only given San Francisco's only given up 105 yards passing a game. I mean, that's pretty stout. They're ranked first in the league in that category. This pass defense is pretty legit. So, and obviously if they can get pressure on Drew Brees outside of Michael Thomas, where's he going to go to throw the ball? And Kamara, I guess, out of the backfield. But, not a team that's going to hit you with a solid wide receiver 2 or 3. So, and really no tight end to speak of either. I mean, Jared Cook's been, I would say Jared Cook is probably one that, I think is a yellow light. If you're starting you're starting Thomas, you're starting Kamara. I would say Cook is probably the only other yellow light in this game. But I think this could be a really kind of grinded out game.
Yeah, I agree with there. Moving on, Miami Dolphins at New York Jets. Pretty ugly game here, though. 2 bad defenses, really. So it actually could be relatively high scoring. Ryan Fitzpatrick doesn't give a shit about your tank. He doesn't give a shit about your tank.
He doesn't care about nothing.
But yeah, I mean, I think the big
Bless
surprise.
his heart. He deserves to be on a better team than what he's on. If he was on the Steelers right now, man, that would be. He would. I just feel bad for the guy because he's played inconsistently, but I mean, man, his ups are real up there. So
yeah,
it's just honestly, it's fun to watch. I mean, I've enjoyed watching him just crush Dolphin fans. Their hopes and dreams. They've played their way out of Joe Burrow. They've played their way out of Chase Young. Like this team this is worst case scenario. It reminds me a lot actually of the Jets a few years ago with Josh McCown. Josh McCown in a year that it was pretty obvious the Jets were tanking, won them like 4 or 5 games and everyone was so upset about it. This is what it reminds me of. So, I mean, who you playing in this game?
Well, I think almost all of the pass catchers for Miami, really. Most of the pass catchers across the board, if I'm really thinking about it. I think Fitzpatrick's a fine start, especially in Superflex. But Devontae Parker, 5th-year breakout. How about that?
I love it.
At this point, he is a must start every week. But especially against a New York Jets secondary that's given up the 10th most fantasy points over the last 5 weeks. Is it a Patrick Laird week? Is a good question.
It could be. I mean, Balaj is hurt.
Yeah.
I don't even know who their 5th running back is. I mean, yeah, he's catching passes. So, especially in a PPR league, I mean, I think it's at least worth considering. It's unlikely that most teams need him to start. Hopefully you're not relying on him to actually. But I don't think it's the worst start on the planet.
By the way, the Jets have given up the fewest fantasy points to running backs over the past 5 weeks.
I'm not saying it's the best start. It's pretty bad. But I think that again, passing floor is at least somewhat there in a PPR league. He didn't look good running the ball out. Who are we? Why are we even talking about that?
I don't know.
This is
what about Mike?
He's a joke. And that team. I can't wait until DeAndre Swift is on this Miami team just to see how miserable they can make him look too. They're probably going to trade him to some other team in 3 years, and it's just going to be sad for everybody. But whatever, it's fine. Le'Veon Bell, yes, you should play Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki. What do you think about him? Been coming on of late, been much more involved of late.
Yeah, I think I'd feel okay with it. If you're hurting at tight end, I'd be okay with it. Let's put it that way. I'd be okay with it because they're slinging the ball all over the place. I mean, clearly Fitzpatrick doesn't give a crap about anything, so he's going to do what he do. So,
on the other side of the ball, I think Sam Darnold's a good start. Robbie Anderson. Been heavily involved, or not heavily involved, but very much involved over the past 2 weeks, really the past 3 weeks, if we think about it. He's got a touchdown or 80 yards in every or over 80 yards in each of the last 3 games. Much more involved. Seems him and Darnold have rekindled their romance or relationship. So I think Robbie Anderson's kind of the go-to here. Jamison Crowder as well is a good start. Just a bad secondary overall for Miami. So yeah, I mean Darnold, maybe Ryan Griffin as well.
Yeah, I mean I could dig that for touchdown upside.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so most of the pass catchers on that side of the ball, Lev Bell. Robbie
Bell's best game of the year came against Miami earlier this year.
So basically start everybody except for Demaryius Thomas because after he had a few good games, he just kind of died.
What about Jamison Crowder?
I like Jamison Crowder.
I'm probably not starting him, I'll be honest. But
all right. Well, I mean, he's the one that's getting the targets is the big thing here. Like he had only 4 targets against Oakland, but 9 last week. He only caught 2, 8 in week 11, 6 in week 10, 9 in week 9. Like he's getting targets. He just hasn't been doing anything with those targets the past 2 weeks. So
yeah.
I mean, it's a good.
We'll see. They could go back to him. I mean, he had a good game against Miami earlier in the year.
I would say if
receptions.
He's kind of like a flex option, I suppose.
Yeah.
He's more of a flex option than anything here. I would say Robbie Anderson's probably a better start this week than Jamison Crowder. On to our next matchup here. Trying to fly through a bunch of these real quick. Indianapolis Colts at Tampa Bay Bucks. Brissett is a good start this week. Zach Pascal is a good start this week. Jack Doyle is a good start this week. I am not trusting Mac. I'm not trusting Jonathan Williams. I'm not trusting any of the running backs. Tampa Bay is very good against the run, extremely poor against the pass. So Paris Campbell actually might be a sneaky flex start this week if you're looking for
some risky.
I mean, if you're looking for that crazy upside, maybe Paris Campbell. Is Chester Rogers playing?
It doesn't look like he's going to.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's Doyle, Pascal, and Brissett. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. And then there's some very obvious starts on the other side of the ball. Jameis Winston, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. And then I don't know if you can really trust the backfield.
Who knows what's happening with that Tampa Bay backfield? Every time we think, oh, Ronald Jones is the guy, it's like, oh, here comes Peyton Barber for 2 touchdowns and 90 yards and a 2-point conversion. Like you just can't trust either of them. I mean, you would think that this would be an okay matchup, but there's just no way to know. Again, it's kind of like the same thing with San Francisco. If you don't know, it's hard to trust any of them.
So yeah, basically it's your usual suspects for Tampa Bay, Winston, Godwin, and Evans. nothing really special there. Or in this game to really think about. It's going to be the battle of the passing games. They might have the highest over under of the week, so it's going to be likely the highest scoring game of the week. Denver Broncos at Houston Texans. Drew Lock got his first win last week, 2 touchdowns, under 200 yards passing, but the Houston Texans secondary is rough to say the least. So Drew Lock is a QB2 this week. I don't hate.
I have to start him in a couple leagues as my QB2, and I don't love it, but he showed what I thought he showed in college, which is that dude has some serious arm talent. I mean, a much, much rawer version of Josh Allen. And I think that
I would raw version. I would say a much more raw version of Patrick Mahomes. Josh Allen was rough coming out of college.
Yeah, but I just don't. I'm talking just arm talent. I mean, just being able to take a football and throw it far and throw it semi-accurately. I mean, I think that in college I saw a lot of Drew Lock. He looked almost afraid as soon as pressure came. And I didn't see that as much, at least in the first half last week. Now in the second half, I think that defense got to him, and you could tell that, I still think Drew Lock needs some seasoning a little bit. But I don't expect a horrible game. I think a QB2 game could be, is well within his range of outcomes this week. And I think that makes him startable in Superflex.
Sutton is a must start at this point.
Yes.
He has made a gigantic step forward in his second season. Other than that, I mean, maybe Lindsey if you have to, but he just hasn't been involved as much in the passing game, which is kind of scary, though he has been extremely efficient with his touches in most weeks. He was not last week. Still the RB14, but over the last 3 weeks, he has not scored double-digit fantasy points. So temper your expectations, I suppose, with Phillip Lindsay, especially if you have to start him. I'm not touching Royce Freeman, not touching Noah Fant or Noah Fant. And there's not really any other pass catchers I really trust for Denver. On the other side of the ball, obviously Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins are must starts. You have anything on Will Fuller?
I mean, Fuller is, again, he's another one of those guys that every time he touches the field, you could see greatness, and you could be severely disappointed. He could pull a hammy the minute he walks out. I think that if he's playing, I think he is worth starting, but he's still limited with this hamstring, and that is not ideal. I mean, the Patriots basically shut him down, but the week before, he had 140 yards on 11 targets. So, he's the epitome of a boom bust guy. If you need a big week, if Will Fuller is I think he's a solid wide receiver 3 option because he can win you a week. And there aren't a ton of wide receiver 3s that can do that and have done that as consistently as Will Fuller has. So I would say that startable, yes, but only as a wide receiver 3, maybe a wide receiver 2 if you're like really needing a huge week from somebody. But I think he's going to end up in that wide receiver 3 range for me as far as like weekly projections.
Honestly, Kenny Stills might be interesting this week because of that. I mean, Chris Harris likely shadowing DeAndre Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
If Will Fuller is kind of iffy this week, Kenny Stills could be the guy here to own against this Broncos secondary. And then you have Darren Fells, who seems to be a favorite target of the of
touchdowns
Watson in the red zone, man. And really that's all you can ask for from tight ends is the guy, if he catches a touchdown, he's basically made your day for tight ends. So
yep. And Fells can catch 2 on any given day. So
yeah, so not a bad
moves.
start there. What do you think about the running backs here? I mean, Carlos Hyde, after starting off very strong, is he dead? Did he die?
You know, I don't know if he died, but man, it seems like they kind of like have figured out that maybe Duke Johnson is more effective for this offense. Again, last week, 6 targets. He rushed the ball 9 times. We're still not seeing like a full bell cow. I trust Johnson more than I trust Hyde. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, in PPR, especially Duke Johnson, I'm honestly,
it has to be a PPR. You can't trust him in standard.
Yeah, I can't.
He's never had more than 10 rushing attempts in a game.
This is one of those situations where I'm probably sitting both because I'm not trusting either of them.
I cannot wait for the running back class of next season. Can you just imagine? Look at the teams that need running backs right now. Houston could use a bell cow back. Atlanta could use a bell cow back. San Francisco could use a bell cow back. These are good teams that need good running backs, and we could have potentially 5 or 6 really good ones coming into the league next year. I'm just speculating. I'm getting antsy for the off season.
No, I hear you.
You can just tell, but we can keep moving on.
I'm right there with you. Los Angeles Chargers at Jacksonville Jaguars. We talked about the running or the lack of run defense on both of these teams. So the running backs here are must starts. Fournette, Gordon, and Austin Eckler, who has still been pretty involved despite Melvin Gordon coming back. Then you have the Phillip Rivers, who is absolutely washed at this point. I don't think anybody can deny that, but Keenan Allen continues to get targets. It seems like Mike Williams is good for like a 50-yard catch, and then that's about it.
Air yard king.
Yeah.
That dude.
And then
if air yards counted for anything more than just they count for anything, Mike Williams has got you.
Yeah.
That dude it's ridiculous.
And then Hunter Henry's a go-to guy. So I'm not starting Mike Williams because you can't really trust him. Keenan Allen's I think you have to start every week. Hunter Henry, you have to start every week. And then the running backs for Los Angeles. Like I said, on the other side, you have to start Fournette. Are you starting Minshew this week?
No.
I am not either.
If I can avoid it, no. I mean, Derwin James is back. That doesn't spell good. I know that last week was his first game back. So, that was I think he was shaking off some rust. I think this team's defense is going to basically I think they're out to prove something, that this team is better than what their record shows. And I think they're going to beat up on Jacksonville as far as the defense in the passing game, at least. I don't know if they're going to be able to beat up the running game, but passing game for sure.
Against quarterbacks, Los Angeles has allowed only one quarterback to score over 20 fantasy points since week 4. So that just tells you how good they've been against the pass. So if you have better options, I mean, he might be an okay QB2, but if you have better options than Gardner Minshew, I am not starting him this week. That extends to his pass catchers. Chris Conley, not a bad start, been very heavily involved, but I don't know DJ Chark has just, mind you, he did have Foles, probably will be heavily targeted by Gardner Minshew, but he has, and I just forgot his name too, as I look up our lad's depth charts.
Wait, are you talking about D.D. Westbrook? Are you talking
about
No,
I'm
Chris
talking
Conley?
about, no, I am
Who are you talking about?
Casey Hayward.
Casey Hayward.
DJ Chark has to probably face Casey Hayward most of the day, so he is likely in for a bad day. Yep. So I would pivot somewhere else if I can. D.D. Westbrook, Chris Conley this week. But yeah, I think the only one that I'm really trusting is Leonard Fournette on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's pretty much where I'm at. Westbrook did have a personal day missed on Wednesday. Doesn't look like it's an injury. Always kind of got to raise your eyebrows on those personal days. Is he sick? Is it something where he might end up missing this game because of some unknown reason? I don't know. I'm just noting that for everyone that's listening.
Very good. Moving on, Tennessee Titans at Oakland Raiders. Ryan Tannehill has been in
The man. he's been all right. He's been pretty good.
What do you mean all right?
He's been pretty good.
All right.
He's been much better than Mariota has been in the last 3 years. So
Tannehill has been the QB5 over the past 5 weeks.
Okay, he's been pretty good.
And probably better over the past 6. He actually had his worst start last week since he's become the starter. So, but Oakland's secondary is atrocious. This is a very good matchup for Ryan Tannehill. Probably a good matchup for one of A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. Good luck figuring that one out.
I default to Brown at this point, but I don't like either of them. I'm going to probably sit both, to be honest.
So Adam Humphries it is.
Nope.
But yeah, I would probably, if you had to choose, it would be A.J. Brown. But regardless, Tannehill's a must start. It's just best guess who's going to actually get the targets. Derrick Henry been an absolute monster this season. Despite not being really involved in the pass game, he is the RB4. He has 23 targets on the season. He is the RB4. That tells you how much of a monster he's been on the ground.
He is a freak. He would be so hard. He's just so hard to tackle. The dude's just like a freight train.
So
just an absolute
must
train.
start every week.
Yep.
On the other side of the ball for Oakland, Josh Jacobs is a must start basically every week. He's
been playing with a fractured shoulder. I think that's interesting. When you hear fractured shoulder, it's probably not as significant as what it sounds much worse than it probably is, but I think it's worth noting that he's been injured for the majority of this season, despite the fact that he's still playing very, very well.
How do you feel about Derek Carr?
That I don't feel great about it, but I could see where, QB2, low end QB2.
And really pass catchers. I mean, Tyrell Williams started the season on fire, but of late just not been involved. Darren Waller's really the only pass catcher I trust there. Hunter Renfrow, if you're in a pinch. But yeah, I mean, just not heavily involved Tyrell Williams, which is extremely disappointing. But so really it's Josh Jacobs and Darren Waller for me. I mean, would you be trusting either of Tyrell Williams or Hunter Renfrow?
No. I would say it's basically just Waller, and that's really it outside of Jacobs. I mean, and that's really, Waller hasn't been playing exceptionally well recently either, but tight end, again, he was a tight end one with 7 points. So you don't need him to be amazing.
He did have 100 yards last week.
Okay. So, I mean, just on reputation alone this year, you got to start him. So,
yeah. So, kind of a gross game in terms of fantasy assets in that one. Try and knock out these last 4. Kansas City Chiefs and New England Patriots. I think that is the best game of the week.
It's going to be a good one. I think this is a big game for the Patriots.
Yeah.
If they lose this one, it's not going to look good. They haven't really won a big marquee game against a team that's really, really competing recently. So, I mean, I think they kind of have to avenge the loss to the Ravens earlier this year, where the Ravens just spanked them. So I think they need to win. They're going to be fired up for this one.
Yeah. So Patrick Mahomes must start. Travis Kelce must start. Tyreek Hill must start.
Yep.
Other than that, don't love it.
Nope.
I mean, McCoy, I guess. Damian Williams is probably going to be out again with that rib, I'm guessing.
Most likely, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, LaShawn McCoy should get a majority of the touches back there, but New England's been very good on all sides of the ball or on all facets of the game on defensive side of the ball. So, yeah, I mean, basically, again, usual suspects there, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. For New England, Edelman and Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm okay with Michelle this week. I'm not a Michelle guy, so this is, I think it's matchup only.
Oh, yeah.
I think I'm okay with, I would probably say that Edelman and Brady are really the only two that I feel pretty good about starting in a super flex. Michelle, yeah, I think he's fine as an RB2.
I actually don't mind White either. So Kansas City has given up the second most yards on the ground and the seventh most receptions this season. So they have been, and that's to running backs. I apologize. So they have been horrendous against all running backs. So White and Michelle, I think, are decent starts this week.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you can really trust N'Keal Harry.
I don't think you can. Brady's just been funneling targets to Edelman. He's the only one that you can trust week to week.
I mean, Mohamed Sanu's not a terrible start, but I mean, he's been pretty involved since he was traded, but he's not going to give you big games. I mean, I guess the last 2 weeks he's kind of been rough, but he had that 81-yard, 1 touchdown game. Okay, maybe not. Now that I'm looking at his stats, never mind. Edelman, Michelle, White. That's
it. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure we haven't seen really much of anything since that first game where you had like a ridiculous amount of targets.
And those other pass catchers, not really worth it. Pittsburgh Steelers at Arizona Cardinals. This is a pick'em game. You pick. This is kind of a rough game if I'm really looking at it. I mean, I think Snell is the best option for Pittsburgh. Yeah. We've already talked about James Conner's out. Is Juju Smith-Schuster playing today or on Sunday?
It's not looking like it. He is. I would say it's pretty unlikely that he plays. He's been dealing with a knee issue. He's had a concussion. You know, this is one of those where it just doesn't look like he's going to be ready in time to play. So, I mean, James Washington, if Juju's out, I think is a decent wide receiver 3/low end wide receiver 2 option because it looks like, you know, he has at least the trust downfield from Hodges. I think Snell is playable, and then on the other side, I think Kyler is playable, but it's going to be a tough matchup. I think this could get an ugly game. Mm-hmm. I would say that running backs, you can't trust any of those. Same thing, you know, if you can't trust any of the three of them, man, I feel bad for David Johnson. He is just, I've never seen somebody's value just absolutely tank as quickly as David Johnson's has. But
and he
looks bad.
But they could, I mean, they need him as a pass catcher, I think. But that's just
yeah. I mean, I think that I don't trust Drake. I don't trust, you know, I don't trust Edmonds. I don't trust DJ, which is sad. Yeah. I mean, actually, the more I think about it, the more I probably don't. I don't know if Kyler is probably. I guess Kyler on the ground could maybe get you solid numbers, but man, this is going to be an ugly game. I feel like this is going to be. Yeah. I feel like every game the Steelers have played this year has been an ugly game. So I expect another one here.
By the way, James Washington, wide receiver 16 over the past 5 weeks.
So yeah, I think for pass catchers, especially with Juju out, I mean, Washington, I think Snell's a good play. Outside of that, you know, this could very, very well be, you know, 30 points or less total for the week. I'm probably smashing the under.
Seahawks at Los Angeles Rams. Chris Carson's a must start. Russell Wilson's a must start. Tyler Lockett at this point, apparently not a must start. Don't know what happened there.
Tyler Lockett cost me at least 2 games last week, and I respect the heck out of these guys for playing. Again, if Lockett ever listens to this show, I still respect you as for what you do on the football field, but man, that one hurt me real bad. So I'm going to try not to be too salty about it, but I don't think you can trust him. You can't trust him.
No, I mean, the last 3 weeks specifically have been real bad. It seems like DK Metcalf is kind of the guy now. I mean, with that in mind, actually, now that I say that, I almost think that this is a Lockett game. Metcalf's probably facing Jalen Ramsey most of the time this week. This probably is a Lockett game if I'm really thinking about it now.
Yeah, I could see him bouncing back, and I still think him and Russell have a good connection, and I could see Russell kind of feeding him to get him back in the groove of things after 2 or 3 bad games here. 3 bad games for sure. So I could see Russell feeding him a little bit. We could see another big target game. He's had a few of those. He's had
actually
18 target games. So would not be surprised if we see him blow up again.
As I'm looking at this, Larry Fitzgerald 11.6, Willie Snead 15.4, Anthony Miller 11.4. I don't know. Did Deontay? No, I guess that was Juju was playing that game. Tyler Boyd 12.8. Lockett did have a 51 yards and a touchdown earlier this season. Chris Godwin 41.2. Like, it seems they are most vulnerable from wide receiver or against wide receivers from the slot.
And he was sick last week. I think he's been hurt. He had the flu last week. I think this could be a Lockett game. I agree with you.
And then
we'll go yellow light. Minimum.
Yeah, there you go. Are you starting Rashad Penny? Is a legitimate question.
As a Chris Carson guy, I cannot in good faith start Rashad Penny, but I think he will put up enough numbers to justify starting him.
Okay, so
the yellow light, green light Carson, yellow light Penny.
I think I'm sitting Metcalf this week because of the matchup. So
I think he's going to struggle. I think he's going to start. I think Ramsey's going to teach him a lesson, unless he gets a big play down the field. But I still feel like Lockett's the better start of the two, despite being worse.
Jacob Hollister, been very involved since he was really activated, but especially over the past 4 weeks. Is this a good matchup? I mean, you have Corey Littleton in the middle there, but you also have Eric Weddle. Is this going? I mean, would you be starting Jacob Hollister this week? I guess is a good question as well.
If I absolutely have to, yes. If I can find another option, I'm probably going to go with a safer option if I can. I wouldn't start him over like Darren Fells. I would probably start Fells over him. So
yeah, I agree with that.
I just think the matchup isn't ideal, and I think this is going to be a running back game for Seattle, even though it seems like every game is a running back game for Seattle.
Oh, that reminds me. I forgot to mention Pittsburgh Steelers at Cardinals. What about Vance McDonald? Cardinals give up they
bleed fantasy points
to
McDonald. I think is startable this week for sure.
I agree with that.
And I think that the Steelers game plan will revolve at least somewhat around getting the ball. I mean, I could see him 8+ targets easily because I think they're going to attack the weakest point of this defense, especially without Juju. So yeah.
For the Rams, we talked about Woods. I think he's the safest play here. Todd Gurley's a must start. Tyler Higbee is also a must start for me this week. I don't know what's going. Can you tell me what's going on with Gerald Everett?
He's been dealing with a knee injury. and it looks like he hasn't practiced yet, which isn't that's not ideal. So I'm going to say he's probably going to sit.
So that means Tyler Higbee gets
Higbee.
Seattle
the
Seahawks.
man.
Seattle Seahawks have given up the second most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So Tyler Higbee went for over 100 and a touchdown last week against Arizona. I don't know if you can expect that this week, but 50 and a touchdown very easily. So I like Tyler Higbee a lot this week.
Yep, me too. I'll be starting him in quite a few of my playoff matchups.
SFB9, baby. SFB9.
Gosh, don't make me sad.
And then finally, New York Giants and Philadelphia Eagles battle of
I feel like we went through this a lot earlier with our.
No, I agree.
I don't have a ton to say about it.
Daniel Jones. We didn't talk much about Daniel Jones. Probably a decent QB2 this week against a bad Philadelphia secondary. I do like Sterling Shepard now that he's back. Evan Ingram, is he going to play at all for the rest of the season?
Man, this is one I put a tweet out earlier a couple weeks ago that basically was highlighting some guys that are hurt that could maybe not return this year just because their teams are so bad. We see it every year where guys just get shut down, even if they're injuries that wouldn't normally shut a guy down for. When teams are bad, they shut these players down. And man, I think Golden Tate returns this week. He's been dealing with a concussion. Ingram has been practicing, so there's a chance that he plays, but man, they're going to be super cautious with him because he's part of their future. And again, foot injuries aren't to be trifled with. So I think it's looking like he could play, but he'd be hard to trust because who knows how much they're going to actually let him get out there.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't be playing him either way, especially because you have those three other pass catchers, Saquon, Golden Tate, and Sterling Shepard. So yeah, it's definitely like Ethan said, he probably doesn't play. Even if he does, I'm not touching him.
What do you think about Eli Manning playing this week? Because it's clear that Daniel Jones is going to be hurt. Is hurt, and he is not going to look like he's going to be practicing. He's not practicing this week. Doesn't look like he's playing either.
I did say Daniel Jones. I'm an idiot. I apologize to all our listeners.
It's okay. We forgive you.
I mean, QB2. The weakness of the Eagles is their secondary. They've allowed the fifth most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. Just last week, they allowed Devontae Parker 159 yards and 2 touchdowns. To quarterbacks, a little better, middle of the road. But, I mean, as a QB2, I don't hate it.
Yeah, I don't think I hate it either. I worry about just yardage. I don't know how much yardage he's going to put because he doesn't test people down the field, which is a benefit to a bad cornerback secondary. You're not going to give up huge plays. I don't expect them to give up a ton of huge plays. I do think it is good for your, this offense. I think Saquon Barkley could have a ton of targets, a ton of catches in a PPR league. I think Golden Tate and Shepard could also see a ton of work, especially if Ingram doesn't play. So, he's going to be dumping it all over the place. And maybe Eli has, maybe he wants to play another year and this is kind of his audition and he wants to start slinging it around. I think that it could be a deceptively good QB2 week for him. So I'd say worth at least considering as a QB2 in a super flex.
Yeah, I agree with that. Here's I feel is a relevant question. I mean, I don't think you can sit Saquon, but the strength of the Philadelphia Eagles defense is against the run. And Saquon has definitely had a tough road, and I don't know if he's actually healthy.
Yeah, that's the only question. I mean, again, when you got a bad team like this, you're going to see some players sitting that would normally not sit. I don't expect that to be the case with Barkley. It looks like he's, it looks like he should suit up. Kind of a disappointing year for Barkley, just because I think the injury is bothering him a lot more than people were giving it credit for. High ankle sprains, even when you're a superstar, even when you return much quicker than I would expect, it's still going to affect you going into the season. Now, last week, again, bounce back game for him. 83 yards on the ground, 3 catches, but he had 7 targets for 32 yards. So I'm not worried about Barkley personally, unless they for sure shut him down. And looking at their next matchup, they get Miami next week. And if they decide to shut some of these guys down before Miami, there's going to be a lot of fantasy teams that are going to be upset.
All right. And then we don't necessarily have to talk about the Eagles too much. I do like Alshon this week. I do like Wentz this week.
Miles Sanders.
Yeah, as Jordan Howard doesn't look like he's playing, so Miles Sanders is a start.
They didn't put Howard on IR yet, have they?
I don't believe so.
So yeah, I would still say I don't expect him to play. So Miles Sanders.
Obviously Zach Ertz, and then what do you think about Dallas Goedert?
I like Goddard. Ertz did. I said earlier in this podcast that Ertz didn't play. He was hurt all week. It didn't look like he was going to play. He did end up playing. I think Goddard, again, tight end so bad, and they use both of them. There's not very many tight ends around the league that are getting the target share that he's getting. So, yeah, I think Goddard is startable.
And I'm not trusting Aguilar. That dude's got hands of stone. And I think that's about the only one that I'm really sitting this week. I mean, Matt Collins is there, but I don't think you're ever really debating starting him. So with that, we are finally through. Sorry this took forever, but nobody's on bye. So we had an entire
we went injuries, we did questions, we did everything.
So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Sorry we lost James in the middle there, but I appreciate him being on, as I'm sure you guys do too. Thank you, Ethan, for being with us, talking injuries,
absolutely,
talking starts and sits. Follow the show at Superflex Show on Twitter. Follow me at FF Stompy. Follow Ethan at eTurnerFF_PT. Follow James Catullus at _James the Brain. Also, subscribe to the DLF family of podcasts. A lot of fantastic podcasts out there, fun ones as well. DGN, the Dynasty Game Night with Outhouse and John Bosch and Matt. And I just forgot Matt's last name. But go subscribe to that. Go subscribe to us on wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to rate and review. It helps us get out to the masses, helps us help more people out, help us help you. And I guess we can't sign off without saying, as always, stay sexy and super flexy. Good luck in week 14, everybody.